Snook fishing, okay? This is really, gosh, a specialized type of fishery. It really is. Snook are extremely popular fish here in Florida. When you think about fishing in Florida, you really think about two species, sailfish and snook, right? Sailfish on the offshore side, of course, is predominant, and snook on the inshore side. It's such a popular fish, not only for local and resident anglers, but of course, fishermen travel here from all over the world to get in on this hot snook fishing as well. What we're going to be talking about tonight is not catching snook. Here you go, sir. You just joined us. There's a magazine for you. Is not catching snook this big. Anybody ever catch a snook that was 12 inches long? No. Okay. That's a 1-year-old snook. That is not what we are talking about tonight. We are talking about catching fish this big, if not larger. Okay. We want to catch 36-inch snook or even larger. Wait. Take a picture of me. Real quick. Wait. How about like this? Okay, right there. All right, that's what we're talking about, big snook, okay, big ones. And in order to catch big snook, I got to tell you, really need to be dialed in. You've got to be dialed in on the tackle. You've got to be dialed in on a lot of different factors. And there's a lot of different fisheries, okay, a lot of different fisheries in our area, a lot of different venues for snook. And we're going to try and talk a lot about each one of them. Keep in mind, I never claim to be an expert angler who knows everything about everything. That's the real cool thing about fishing is every day when you're out there, you're learning. And it's the same with me. And if something is working for you and you are a successful snook fisherman, please tell me what it is, okay? Because I'm always learning and I'd like to know your tricks as well so I can share them with everybody, okay? What I'm going to share with you are proven tactics. You want to catch big snook? Listen to what I'm going to tell you. Okay, I'm going to shorten that learning curve for you in a very, very big way. You know, just listen, okay? Listen to the details, because again, it's all about the details. The fish themselves, you know, let's talk a little bit about snook. Anybody know how many different species of snook there are in Florida? 5, okay? 5 different species of snook. Small scale fat snook, large scale fat snook, sword spine snook, tarpon snook, and common snook. Do I have a picture? They all look like this, okay? They all look just like this. And most people cannot differentiate the difference on if this is a small scale snook, a fat scale snook, a tarpon snook, etc. This, of course, is a common snook, okay? The most common of all snook around Florida. But again, there are 5 different species. A 1-year-old snook, again, is about 12 inches. A 4-year-old snook is approximately 24 inches. A 6 to 8-year-old snook, okay, is of course approaching that slot size. Keep in mind, snook are hermaphrodites. Anybody know what that means? That means they go from being boys to being girls, okay? So at the age of 6 to 8, they transition from male to female. Okay, and to ensure that the snook population remains healthy and strong. So all of the large snook above that 36-inch size are females. Okay, and we all know females can be a little stubborn. They can be a little picky, right? I'm not saying anything bad. Hey, I'm not saying anything bad. I love women as much as everybody, okay? I'm just saying that they can be a little touchy, okay? So, you know, you've got to really listen to all, you know, again, pay attention to the details. So, like I said, at 6 to 8, they turn into females, okay? That fish is the slot size, and when I say slot, in the state of Florida, you are, or in our region, you are allowed to keep and harvest 1 snook per person per day, okay? 1 snook in a slot size of 28 to 32 inches. That's total overall length. So that fish must be within that 4-inch range in order for you to harvest that fish and take it home and eat it. And that is if the season is open. And it's a limited season. Snook fishery, snook season is not open year-round for us. And keep in mind, the snook fishing on the Gulf Coast of Florida is very different than the snook fishing here on the southeast coast. It's very different. Okay, there's a lot of different habitat. You've got shallows, you have estuaries, you have inshore fisheries. And not that we don't have those here, but certainly not like the Gulf Coast. So what we're going to be talking about is not how you catch snook in the 10,000 Islands or Naples or Tampa. We're talking about how you catch snook in Broward, Dade, Palm Beach County, so to speak, in this area, okay? So again, the really large snook are females and of course have to be protected. So remember that this is very sporty. This is a sporty type of fishery because the vast majority of fish that you catch are either going to be too small or too big, okay? Now, of course, we'd rather catch too big than too small, right? But you're only allowed to keep that one fish. So this is not about loading your freezer with fresh fish. There are other fisheries that are better suited for that. The fish themselves, why are they so coveted? First of all, they're hard-fighting fish. They really do put up a great battle. Okay, they're aggressive, although they can get a severe case of lockjaw. Anybody ever go snook fishing, see a lot of snook and not catch a single snook? This guy's going, yep, oh yeah, okay? They can get lockjaw, there's no question about that. But they could also be very aggressive. They are good to eat, obviously. But, you know, snook is like, it's almost like a cult-like following. There are guys that are snook aficionados, where they live to catch snook, to fish for snook, and that's it. Their whole life, their whole fishing career revolves around catching big snook, and they're really, really, really good at it. Okay, they've learned the hard way what works and what doesn't work, and they're really fine-tuned into catching these fish. So the different venues, let's talk about them. We've got inlets, which of course are really popular for snook. We've got bridges, we've got piers, we've got the beach, and we have spillways. Okay, spillways. So we're going to talk about all of those because each of those requires a different approach. Remember that snook are aggressive. They're aggressive feeders that feed on a wide variety of live bait. A wide variety of live bait. They will eat goggle eyes, pinfish, croakers, mojaras, sardines, pilchards, mullet. And anybody know what a mullet is? Right? Okay, mullet. Let's not forget about mullet. They'll eat cichlids, they'll eat bluegills, they'll eat ballyhoo, they'll eat ladyfish, they'll eat catfish. There's almost nothing that a snook won't eat. They'll eat a dolphin skin laying on the bottom of my canal on a hook. Okay? Write that one down. Okay? So in turn, they're real aggressive. They'll eat a variety of lures as well, swim baits, topwater plugs, bucktails, and jigs. Okay, will all work. So there's a wide variety of different live, dead, and artificial offerings that you can use to target snook. It's just a matter of dialing in what you're using and where you're using it and why. Okay, because again, you've got to pay attention. So let's first talk about inlets. The most popular inlet for snook fishing in our region is Jupiter. Jupiter Inlet. Okay, if you want to catch a big snook, who wants to catch a big snook? Okay, go to Jupiter Inlet. All right, go to Jupiter Inlet. You'll catch a big snook. It's almost impossible not to. Okay, it really is. There's a ton of big snook in Jupiter Inlet. There's also a ton of big snook in your flag, Boynton Inlet. Okay, these things stack up. They stack up. You could be in the inlet, the water's clear, and you can look down and see them. Okay, and I'm not talking about see one or two snook. Anybody ever fish Jupiter Inlet or Boynton Inlet for snook? How many snook have you seen? Tons, literally. We're not exaggerating when we say tons. They're stacked like cordwood. Okay, they're all in there to spawn, to prepare to spawn. And keep in mind, when big snook spawn, the smaller males will come up to the females and they'll nudge them. They'll literally hit them with their tail and they'll nudge them to encourage the females to release their eggs. The males then fertilize the eggs. The eggs are translucent. You can't even see them. So this way that they don't get eaten by predators. And of course they float out with the tide and the currents, control the eggs until they hatch and grow. 2 out of every 10 million, 2 out of every 10 million eggs reach 4 years old. Okay, so 24 inches. 2 out of every 10 million. So think about that ratio. You know, it's just incredible on how many of these eggs in the small snook end up, you know, being eaten by other predators or birds or a variety of, you know, other wildlife. So keep that in mind. So again, Jupiter Inlet, Boynton Inlet are real popular. Sebastian Inlet is real popular, okay? But really Jupiter is like the epicenter of inlet snook fishing, okay? And what these snook do is they stack up in the inlet. They're right on the bottom. You can see them, okay? And they're very dependent on the tide in order to feed. They're in there, but they will not eat if that water is not moving. Okay, if it's incoming or outgoing, they'll eat on both tides, but the water has to be moving, okay, in order for those fish to eat. Outgoing tide often seems to be better. It's flushing a lot of forage out of the inlet. The snook will lay right on the bottom. You fish with live bait, predominantly croakers, mullet, sardines, okay? Of course, whatever you can get your hands on, but they could often be very picky. It's a good idea, for example, when you're fishing for snook in Boynton Inlet, where do you get the bait? In Boynton Inlet. Okay, you go right outside the inlet, and I'm telling you how to do this. Go right outside the inlet, make a sharp left turn to the north. The water's 3 to 5 feet deep right along the beach right there, and with Cebiche rigs, you can catch sardines. Okay, and that, of course, is the bait that you want to use to catch those big snook. Jupiter Inlet croakers tend to be a favorite bait, okay, in Jupiter Inlet. And keep in mind, they have developed a particular rig when you are inlet fishing, especially in Jupiter, and it's called the Jupiter Rig, okay? I kid you not. It's called the Jupiter Rig, okay, when you are snook fishing in Jupiter Inlet. Now, also remember, tackle. You can see there's a lot of rods up here because there's a lot of different sorts of tackle that you can use to fish for snook, for big snook. But it all depends as to where you are and what you're doing, okay, and how you're doing it. Remember, in the inlet, if I'm anchored up in a boat in the inlet and I'm dropping a bait down to the bottom, okay, a live bait, I'm not really worried about structure. There's some rock down on the bottom, but I'm not worried about that fish wrapping me around a piling, right? I'm not worried about that fish running under a bridge or a cable running across a spillway and water rushing out at 300 miles an hour. Okay, a lot of different scenarios there. In the inlet, you can get away with lighter gear. You can get away with a 7 or 8 foot spinning rod, okay, loaded with 20-pound braid or 20 to 30-pound monofilament. That's really all that you need. The rig is key, and again, this is called the Jupiter Rig, and I'm going to explain it to you in detail. Sir, can you do me a favor and just hold that rod for me right there? So I've got my main line. My main line is tied to a barrel swivel right here, okay? Right at this finger, my main line is tied to a barrel swivel. There is 6 to 8 inches of line where that little egg sinker can slide before there's another barrel swivel. So this is mono, okay? Right here, it's monofilament in between these 2 barrel swivels. This egg sinker is 2 to 4 ounces depending on the current. Obviously, if the current's raging, you're going to want a heavier lead. If the current isn't so strong, you can get away with 1 to 2 ounces. And that egg sinker slides, but it only slides 6 to 8 inches. Everybody with me so far? Okay. On the other side of the barrel swivel is my leader. No more than 24 to 30 inches. No more than 24 to 30 inches. And it ends with a super sharp VMC thin wire 5/0 circle hook. So there is the rig right there, and it's called the Jupiter Rig. You drop it right to the bottom, okay, with your live bait. The reason that the egg sinker is not allowed to slide all the way up the line like on a typical fish finder rig, often called a Carolina rig, because then your bait would be able to be swept too far off the bottom. And all of the snook are right on the bottom. They're lying on the bottom. Where do you want your bait? You don't want your bait up on top. They know the food isn't up there, especially a croaker. But if you've got a croaker and he sees 50 snook coming at him, or a mullet, or any other type of live bait fish, and he's looking at an armada of snook headed in his direction, You think he's just going to lay there and go, eat me? Okay, he's going to try and escape, right? So if that was allowed to slide, it's easier for that bait fish to elude predation, for starters. So in order to achieve that proper presentation, especially on that sandy bottom in the middle of the inlets, you can get away with this rig. You don't need this leader right here to be any longer, or else oftentimes this bait will spin if this leader was longer also. So it's an ideal rig. You cast it out, circle hook, you put the rod in a rod holder, you wait for the rod to go whack. What do you do then? You grab the rod, you start reeling, you've got a circle hook, you're going to get the fish in the corner of the mouth 99.9% of the time. Now keep in mind, when it comes to leader material, the lighter the leader, what's going to happen? The more bites. Okay? The lighter the leader, the more bites. The heavier the leader, the less bites. However, you're going to get cut off and you're going to lose fish if you fish too light of a leader, because snook have extremely sharp gill rakers. Really, really sharp gill rakers back here. They also have small, sharp teeth, but these gill rakers right here are like razors. So please be very careful whenever handling big snook. Anybody ever make this mistake? Okay, hold your arm up. She did. Come on, show it to everybody. Come on, show it to everybody. Come on, do it. Up, 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 up. Look, she did. Okay, that's what happens. So you gotta be careful. Super sharp. Okay, again, small teeth, but these rakers are real sharp and they will cut you off. So you obviously need to fish some heavier leader, but the heavier the leader, the less bites you're going to get. So it's all about balance. So it's a good idea. Start with 60-pound fluorocarbon. You don't get any bites, go to 50. You don't get any bites, go to 40. You don't get any bites, go to 30. You don't get any bites, don't go any lower than 30. Keep fishing. Okay, keep fishing and wait for a bite, because any lighter than 30 and you really risk getting cut off. Keep in mind, though, that's also why we fish circle hooks, because once you've got that circle hook in the corner of that fish's mouth, that leader, of course, is not chafing on the fish. Other guys like to fish a long shank J hook, like the VMC, you know, like a live bait hook or something with a longer shank, because again, it keeps that leader further away from the fish's mouth. One or the other are both great options. But just remember that the lighter the leader, the more bites you're going to get. So it's all about balance. You know, do I want to get more bites and potentially lose some fish, or do I want to fish some heavier line and have a little bit more security? Okay. That inlet fishery is pretty solid from spring to fall, peaking in the summertime. Okay, peaking in the summer when those fish are, you know, spawning. It's pretty consistent. The fish are not going to bite 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're very much like you and I. We don't eat around the clock, okay? So they turn on and they turn off. If you're in one particular spot fishing and, you know, you've got a couple of rods out right on the edge of the channel, or there's also some, of course, every inlet has some depressions and potholes and little ridges. So it's not like you can just stop anywhere in the inlet. And let me say this to you, it is against the law to anchor in an inlet, okay, right? Because you are blocking traffic. So you can't just anchor up right in the center of the inlet when boats are trying to come in and out and you're anchored right there. However, it is certainly not uncommon to see boats pushed back from the mouth of the inlet. Do not anchor up in the mouth of the inlet, but back inside off to the sides. Plus nowadays, a lot of these flat skiffs and bay boats are outfitted with these really, you know, technologically advanced trolling motors with spot lock, where you push a button and it holds you in one spot. You know, that's an option. But just keep that in mind. Do not anchor your boat smack dab in the middle of the inlet. Okay? Basic 101 boating rules. Okay? Right? So, in turn, again, Jupiter, great inlet. Boynton, absolutely awesome. Boca. Boca's a good inlet for snook, but we fish it a different way. Okay, the best way that I have found to fish Boca Inlet is not from a boat, it's actually from the jetty itself. Okay, you go right out on that south jetty. Okay, a lot of guys you'll see will go out there with a 5-gallon bucket with mullet, or they'll take a cast net, They'll throw the net and catch the mullet right there. In turn, put the mullet in a bucket, and then you can fish a live mullet and drift it in and out of Boca. So Boca is a real good inlet for snook as well. You can get away with some lighter gear in the inlets as well if you want to be a little bit more sporty, but you certainly don't need anything heavier than what we just discussed. Now, moving from inlets, let's talk about the beaches for a second, because those snook are coming in and out of the inlet. They come out the inlet, they cruise up and down the beaches, and the beach fishery for snook is really exciting too. It's not as exciting as some of the other things that we're going to talk about, but it can be very productive, and it's really neat because what do we not have on the beach? Structure. Thank you. So because we don't have structure, we can get away with much lighter tackle. We can get away with a rod that weighs practically nothing, an 8-foot graphite rod. It's matched to a small little Daiwa spinning reel, 15-pound braid. Okay, so it's a lot sportier than some of this heavier tackle that we're talking about, or that we're going to talk about. We don't need to fish really heavy gear. One option is to walk and throw a plug. It could be like a Rapala X-Rap, okay, is a really, really effective plug, especially in the ghost pattern, okay, just a white with red. I'm sure he's got them on the wall here somewhere, plenty of them, okay, it's a real good plug to throw. Obviously, anything that mimics a small bait fish, okay, I like the live target is also a real good lure to throw. It mimics the small bait fish. I busted my leader. I'm like, what the? Hold that for me, would you? Thank you. So anyhow, small, again, looks like a pilchard or any sort of sardine or a white bait. We've removed the treble hooks and put on the VMC inline single hooks because A, we're releasing a lot of these fish. Plus, number two, I don't want to get a big fat treble hook stuck in my hand. That ever happen to anybody? Okay, of course, and these fish go wild. So single hooks is all that you need. I'd recommend removing those treble hooks. I like this bait. I can throw it a country mile, especially if there's any sort of breeze. Although keep in mind, a lot of times when you're snook fishing on the beach, thank you, you're not necessarily casting that lure out, because those snook are not way out there. You know where they are? They're in the trough. They're right here. They're running up and down the beach, just slowly cruising right up the shoreline, looking for crabs, shrimp, pretty much anything that they can feed on. So it's a really cool fishery because you can do it with artificial lures like stick baits and plugs, or you can fish live baits. What I like to do is I go down to the beach with a small rod, a very light rod, put a Cebiche Rig on here. Everybody know what a Cebiche Rig is? One of these little bait rigs right here that are on the wall. Okay, so I bring two rods, one that has a Cebiche Rig on it and one that has a circle hook and a leader and a sand spike. Sand spike is the tube you stick in the ground. I stick my bait rod in the sand spike. I walk down to the wash with a Cebiche Rig and I catch a live bait. And there's all sorts of little live baits in the wash, right? Little jacks, there's pilchards, there's sardines. There's guys sometimes that'll bring a cast net to the beach to simplify it all, but you can only fish with one bait at a time. So I'm not trying to catch 100 baits, okay? I'm trying to catch literally a couple. So I catch one, I run up, I put it on my circle hook, I walk down to the beach, I throw it out there on a light rod and just slowly walk down the beach, okay? And just literally live line that live bait and let them naturally swim. You see, you need to remember the key to catching big snook, I don't care where you are, the key is a natural presentation. That's the key. That fish has to believe that that is an easy prey, okay? It has to believe that if it eats that, it's gonna continue on its merry way. If something doesn't look right, move right, smell right, or just doesn't seem right, a 12-inch snook, a 20-inch snook will gobble it up without even thinking twice. A 36-inch snook will not. He'll look at it, if he sees that leader, he's not gonna touch it. Okay, so the key, like I said, in any fishery is a natural presentation. And on the beach, when you're fishing that really small live bait, a 3-inch live bait, can I fish a 3-inch live bait on this rod? Okay, I mean, I'm not even going to feel the bait, right? I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's not the correct outfit for a small little 3-inch live bait. But absolutely on a small rod, this is all you need to go snook fishing on the beach, right here. This is it. There's no structure. He's not going to cut you off. The reel's loaded with 10 or 15 pound braid. Braid is so thin, there's 500 yards of line on here. Okay, that snook is not going 500 yards that way. He's not. He's going this way or this way. And guess what? I'm mobile. I can run. I can chase that fish. So it's all about light tackle. It's one of the most sporty and fun ways to catch big snook is on really light rods right on the beach. Okay? I've got a 39-foot Cebiche with triple 350 Verados. I love my boat, but you know what? I love beach fishing too. It's you know, takes me back to my roots of striped bass fishing up off the northeast coast. You know, beach fishing can be really effective, and it's a lot of fun. Okay, and it's much more affordable than running a 39-foot Cebiche with triple 350s. Okay, keep that in mind. So, but again, that's all you need. 7-foot chaos rod, little Daiwa reel, plenty of line, 30-pound fluorocarbon leader. Okay, you can bump it up, but I found 30-pound is perfectly fine. Small little tiny circle hook like a 2-0 or a 3-0 because we're fishing small baits. Okay, and you want to be able to feel it. If you fish too heavy of tackle, you kill the bait. Okay, it's too much stress on the bait fish itself. And I can assure you that a 3 or 4-inch pilchard laying on its side, okay, is not appetizing to a 36-inch snook. That fish has plenty of food to pick from. Plenty of food. There's plenty of forage up and down the beach. So your bait has to look like one of those easy pickings, so to speak. So again, the plugs or the live bait fishing along the beach, swim baits, you know, there's a million different types of lures that you can throw on the beach, but the trick is to mimic what the snook are feeding on, which again is small bait fish in that 3 to 4-inch range on the beach. You could either do it with a lure, an artificial lure, or of course, as I mentioned, you can catch the live bait and do it that way. Next, we talked about the inlets, we talked about the beach. Let's talk about piers, okay? Anybody fish for snook on piers? Okay. This is hardcore urban warfare, okay? That's what it is. This is not, pier fishing for big snook is not about sport, okay? Pier fishing for big snook is about hardcore, oh my God. It is literally super intense for a very short period of time, okay? You can see the fish. Juneau Pier, absolute awesome. Sebastian, okay? Sebastian, sometimes the water is dirtier than it is, but Juneau, you know, you could see these fish stacked up right under the pier. There's a whole pile of them, am I right? Okay, there's a whole pile of them right under the pier. If you think you're gonna go out there with this, and you're going to hook a 36-inch snook or bigger, because keep in mind, it is not uncommon at these piers to hook a super slot. 40 inches, 45 inches, okay? Snook will reach how big? Anybody know the largest snook recorded in the state of Florida? Over 50 pounds, okay? Over 50 pounds. That's this big, okay? And I'm not exaggerating, right? Because fishermen exaggerate a lot. I'm not exaggerating. Men exaggerate a lot too, but I'm not exaggerating. It's this big, okay? It's that big. Giant, giant snook, okay? You're not stopping that thing with this little measly tackle. You better go out there with nothing less than an 8-foot rod, okay? Nothing less than an 8-foot rod rated for 30 to 60 pound test, okay? I'm telling you, this is not about fun and games. The rod has a long butt section for leverage, so you can stick it under your arm, put the rod right on the rail on the pier. Okay, you're dropping a bait down, the rod is matched. It almost doesn't matter what reel it's matched to because you don't need a lot of line. You need about 50 feet of line at the most, okay? 50 feet of 65 to 80 pound braid, All right, we are not playing games here. When you are pier fishing for big snook and fishing live bait, you're fishing straight up and down. You're not throwing a bait way out there. You know why? Because guess where the snook are? They're right here. They're not out there. If I throw a bait out there, I'm going to catch a ray, okay? A stingray. That's what I'm going to catch way out there. I don't want to catch that. I want to catch the big snook. They're right under the pier, all swimming together. So I'm fishing straight up and down. So you need a big, heavy, conventional rod. I don't care what reel you put on it. You just better make sure that it has a lot of drag, all right? Because there is no drag. You're locking that thing up. Okay? You're not giving that fish any room to pull any line. Because if you do, what happens? He wraps you right underneath. You have, any of you guys here that raise your hand that said you've been pier fishing, how many of the people that have been pier fishing, percentage-wise, have hooked a 20 to 30 pound snook and lost it at the pier? 100%. 100%. If not, then you're not fishing the right way because you're not hooking the big fish. Okay? It's going to happen. You drop that bait down, you're fishing heavy leader, as heavy as you can get away with. Do not, I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but that says 100 pound fluorocarbon, 100 pound test. You can catch giant bluefin tuna that weigh 700 pounds on 100 pound fluorocarbon. But this is the leader material that you need to stop these big snook. Okay? At the bare minimum, if I said 60 to 80 pound, that's not really on the low side. The guys that really have the consistent success catching these big fish at the piers, these big snook, they're fishing this heavy line, this 60 to 80 pound leader, I'm sorry, the 80 to 100 pound leader material. Okay? On the big heavy rods, you drop it down. The fish eats your bait. You lock it up. You're already locked up. And you start cranking. Okay? You are literally giving it everything you have to get that fish out from under the pier, because if he wraps you around the piling or if he rubs the line on the piling, zing pow. Okay? Zing pow. That's what's going to happen. It's going to scream a few feet of drag. It's going to touch that piling. The piling is like a razor blade. There's barnacles and oysters, all kinds of stuff on that piling. They're going to cut you off like this. Okay, it's happened. So you've got to beef it up. You've got to beef up that tackle to land those big snook if you want to catch those big snook at the pier. Anybody can catch a snook this big, right? Anybody can catch one this big. That's nothing. Whew. Okay, we want to catch these. Okay, and those are the ones that are stacked up. So you really need the right gear. Live baits, you can fish lures, but for the big snook at the piers, it's all about live bait. Okay, croakers, moharas, ladyfish, mullet, big mullet. Okay, it's all about the live bait. And goggle eyes, ballyhoo, live ballyhoo are also a good bait, believe it or not, for the big snook at the piers. But it seems like those croakers and the moharas, they just can't resist those. It's a natural bait. It's what those big fish are feeding on. And it's different. You know, when you see all those big snook at the pier, you also see big clouds, shimmering clouds of bait fish, right? A lot of like little silver sides. Sometimes there's goggle eyes. There's all sorts of, little bait fish. But them snook are bottom feeders, and that croaker and the moharas are bottom fish. They're sand perch, so to speak, and they really, really like to eat those. And keep in mind, don't be afraid to fish a big bait. Snook do not nibble, okay? They don't nibble. Snook, especially big snook, they'll approach a bait, they'll look at it, they'll just casually swim up to it as if they're just there to say hello, and then they'll just go, phoop! And in one swift motion, their mouth opens up giant, and it's like a vacuum, and it just sucks in that whole bait. Am I right? They don't nibble. Okay, you guys know that target and catch big snook. It's not like they grab a bait and they're just playing with it, and I think I got a bite. I'm not sure if I have a bite from a 36-inch snook. No, you got a bite. Okay, he ate it. So don't be afraid, or she ate it. Don't be afraid to fish a big bait, because big fish are enticed by big baits, and they've got a huge mouth. We talked about the line, we talked about the rod, the hook. You cannot use the same hook that you're fishing in the inlet on the pier. Why? Because what's going to happen to that thin wire hook? You will bend it. You will literally straighten it because you're putting so much pressure. So again, it's about balance. Okay, the whole entire system. You could have the right rod, you could have the right reel, you could have the right line, you could have the right leader, and you can have the wrong hook, and boom, it's all over with. Or you can have the right hook and the wrong leader, and it's over with. So again, it's a system from beginning to end, and it's about balance. So you've got to use the right hook. For example, VMC has thin wire tournament circle hooks. They also have a Nemesis circle hook, which is a heavier gauge hook that you need 2 tow trucks to straighten out, okay? That's the kind of hook that you need. Otherwise, I'm telling you, you'll just pull those hooks straight or they'll rip right out of the fish. So think about that again, there's a lot more to hooks. You know, here's a perfect example. Here are the Nemesis hooks. And you know what? We're gonna play a little game. I'm going to give this to you, pass it around so everybody can see it, and let's see if it actually makes it all the way to him. Okay? Good luck with that. Marshall, I owe you $22 for a pack of hooks. Let's just throw that out there in advance. But again, those are the right hooks for the piers. Also remember, you know, there are so many guys in Florida, so many really, really experienced fishermen, offshore fishermen, who grew up fishing piers. And today there's a whole other generation of what we call pier rats. There are these kids, okay, these teenagers. And is there any pier rats in here? Okay, yeah, she's going. Okay, you know, and they go, and they're good. Man, they are good. And let me tell you something, don't get in their way. Don't get in their way, okay, because they're serious about catching these big snook. That's all they care about. They don't care about anything else that's going on out there. They care about how many of these slob snook can I land, you know, and they got these big like nets that they drop down, okay, that because of course you're releasing these fish, so you can't use any sort of gaff. You're not going to impale the fish with any kind of big treble hook, you know, like a bridge gaff or anything like that. So it's like a big net on a big circular ring, and they drop it down and they lift the snook up and they're like, wow, and they take all this cool video that they put up on YouTube screaming, okay, and then he knows what I'm talking about, and then they let them go, okay, because of course the fish need to survive. But that's what it's all about. It's like this huge adrenaline rush right there and then for 60 seconds. Not even, because once they get that snook to the top, the snook is laying on the surface and goes, okay, you got me. Fight's over. You got me. So it's literally a matter of pulling it 15 feet through the water column. Nevertheless, they're really good at it. If you've never done it, just watch. Go out there, spend a couple minutes, and watch how these guys do it. And you'll learn a lot from these guys, you know, from these people that are really intent on catching these big snook. That's what pier fishing for snook is like. Then, of course, we have spillways. Okay, and bridges. And let's talk about bridges for a second. Understand your flag too. Understand that snook fishing is best at what part of the day? Nighttime. These fish were designed to feed at night. They have large eyes. Their eyes are on the top of their head. Okay, they were designed to feed at night because they sit on the bottom and they look up like this and they see these shadow lines and they see all the shadows from the lights on the bridges. Okay, and they're just constantly looking up, and they kind of slide out of the current into a little eddy, you know, from the main channel. They'll slide over to a little eddy and they'll just sit there and go back and forth and look up until they see a mullet coming in their direction. Okay, and guess what happens to that mullet? That fish will just come up, or it could be a shrimp or a crab. The fish will just come up and just swallow it. And then he'll just come right back down and he'll get right back into formation. But they're awesome nocturnal predators. Okay, they're awesome at feeding at night. So that really is the best time to fish for them, especially on bridges. Plus, what else is minimized at nighttime? Less boat traffic, right? Okay, a lot less boat traffic, if any at all. So the later it is at night, the better it is. So many good snook fishermen, bridge fishermen, they won't even leave till 2 a.m. They'll only fish like 2 to 5 a.m. because they know that that's the witching hour. That's the time when they're going to catch those big, big fish. Because, you know, when there's a lot of boat traffic, a 36-inch, 40-inch snook is not going to be laying next to a bridge by Atlantic Boulevard on a Saturday morning at 9 a.m. Okay? I assure you, you're not catching that fish Saturday morning at 9 a.m. right there. It's not going to happen. But you show up at 3 in the morning, okay, when there's no boat traffic, and feed a bait off that bridge or under the bridge, and you certainly have a good chance of catching that fish. One of the all-time favorite lures for bridge fishing is, God, I love you guys, is a flare hawk. Okay, this is a really cool lure. It's like a bucktail jig. Okay, it's got a lead head. They come in a variety of different sizes. As you can see, it just has a lead head. It has this little like mylar skirted body, and then part of that skirted body extends past it, almost like a tail. Okay, what does this look like? What sort of forage species does this look like? Nothing. Doesn't look like anything. Looks like a bunch of hair with this bright colored head. Doesn't look like anything. But you know what? In the water, it really does. If you've ever seen a flare hawk fished in the water, it really just, it blows up. Okay, it inflates from the water, and it has this awesome silhouette that really mimics a bait fish. It really does. It looks like a bait fish. I don't know, some people say it looks like a crab. I don't know how that could look like a crab, but maybe, okay? But to me, it looks like a bait fish. It really does. The trick when you are bridge fishing, and again, another really cool thing about snook fishing, you don't need a boat, right? I mean, you can fish for snook from a boat, but you don't need a boat. And you have a chance of catching big fish from land without a boat. There's not a lot of other species that you can do that with. I'm going to say tarpon. There's certainly plenty of places you can hook a tarpon, but it's pretty damn hard to land an 80 to 100-pound tarpon without a boat, you know, from land somewhere. Big snook, on the other hand, you don't need a boat. And most of the big snook that are caught are probably caught without a boat. So by fishing the bridges, again, I'm fishing in an area where there's a lot of structure, right? Can I get away with the light gear? No, I got to beef it up. 8-foot rod, 20 to 40-pound class, okay, on a big spinning reel, loaded with, in this case, 65-pound braid, high vis. I'm not concerned with the fish seeing my high vis because you're fishing at night, and oftentimes that water is murky as well. So don't be concerned with fishing high vis line, plus you want to be able to see it. You're in a low light condition, you want to be able to see exactly where your line is and where your bait is. This flare hawk is a staple around South Florida here for bridge fishing, also spillway fishing, but certainly for bridge fishing for big snook. Depending on the velocity of the current will depend on what size lure you need. 1 or 2 ounces will take care of probably 90% of the scenarios. However, it wouldn't hurt to have a 3-ounce jig or a couple of 3-ounce jigs. As far as color is concerned, listen, when it comes to all artificial lures, okay, when you're snook fishing, you really don't need a lot of different colors, but selecting the right color, I don't want to say a science, but here's a tip how you do it. If the water's crystal clear and really clean, fish a bright colored lure, okay? Something like white. If the water's murky and darker, fish a dark colored lure. Now I know you may be thinking to yourself, well, that sounds counterintuitive. Why would you fish a dark colored lure in dark, murky conditions? Well, why would a bait be bright and reflective in a dark colored situation? You kind of follow what I'm saying? You got to understand what that bait fish would be like in that environment, okay? If the water's crystal clear and that sun is penetrating the water, that fish is going to be vibrant, that bait fish. It's going to glow, it's going to be translucent, it's going to be bright. And as I mentioned earlier, the trick to catching big snook, to fooling big snook, is as natural of a presentation as possible. So you got to start thinking like a big snook in order to fool big snook. So really some light colors, you know, and when I say dark colors, I don't mean black, although a black colored plug is excellent for a lot of species at night, but like a chartreuse or even this red, okay, something like that, a darker color. But if the water's crystal clear, bright moon, clean water, white is a great color. Plus white matches so many bait fish, you know, that these fish feed on. However, it's really important that you present these flare hawks properly. Understand how this is done. We're going to assume that I am standing on a bridge. Bridge is right here. Cars are zipping behind me. The current is coming right here. The current is coming at me, and it's flowing this way, right? So we've got current, it's coming from over here, and it's going that way. I'm standing on the bridge. I want to fish for snook. What side of the bridge, by show of hands, should I be fishing this side, down current, or should I be fishing this side, up current? Up current, okay? Because your bait fish, I don't want to take my lure that is mimicking a bait fish. I don't want to throw it a country mile down current and reel it back up current. Because guess what? That mullet or sardine or whatever bait fish that is, he's probably swimming with the current, right? He's not swimming against the current. These aren't salmon. They're bait fish, okay? They don't swim upriver. They swim with the current. So in turn, I'm going to take my flare hawk and I'm going to cast it as far as I can up current. I'm going to let it sink, and I don't need to impart a lot of action. I'm just going to hold this up high so I don't hook anybody here. Okay? I don't need to impart a lot of action. All I'm trying to do is just slowly reel this bait in just off the bottom at just a little bit faster than the current is moving. Okay? Because remember, that current's going to be flowing in my face. So I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to reel it back to me, throw it out there, reel it back to me, throw it out there, reel it back to me, because where are the snook going to be? The snook are facing what direction? Into the current. They're not facing down current. They're not waiting for baits to go, woo, woo. Oh man, I missed that one, woo. No, they're sitting here waiting to go, there, here it comes, come on, right here, baby. Come on, I got you. Okay, that's what's happening. Okay, they're looking up current. That's how they're feeding, into the tide, into the current. So I want my bait moving with that tide, you know, with that current. That is the proper way to fish these flare hawks. It's not against the current, okay? Again, heavier rod, 65-pound braid. I want to stop this thing dead in its tracks. I fish as heavy of a leader as I could possibly get away with, nothing less than 60-pound. In this particular case, 80-pound. That is a staple to bridge fishing in Florida, in our region, you know, for snook, like I said, are these flare hawks. And we're going to talk about using these at spillways also. Now you hook up on a bridge, same thing as the piers. This is warfare. This is urban warfare. It's hold on, baby, and crank. Just get that thing up. You know, the fish is going crazy. It's probably up on top. The rod's just thumping. You know, it's not a lengthy, long battle, but it's an intense battle, okay? Because again, you gotta stop them or you're gonna lose them. Another great lure, here it goes. Another great lure for bridges, okay, is a swim bait, right? What does this look like? Excuse me, okay? Absolutely right. Looks just like a mullet, okay? And of course, we all know that snook eat mullet, so it's a great bait, a great swim bait. This happens to be a spool tech, and there's something really unique about this swim bait. This is the swim bait of the century, okay? It really is. And what's interesting about it is once you hook a fish, what's in my thumb, I'm not sure if you can see that, is the hook, okay? The lure is now over here. The lure detaches, or I should say the leader detaches from the bait, and this is now 80-pound cable leader, okay, in between the lure and the hook, 80-pound cable leader. What's the purpose of that? Okay, what's the purpose of that? Number one, it prevents you from being cut off, right? Because we just talked about how sharp the gill rakers are on a large snook. So it prevents you from being cut off. Number two, big snook are masters at shaking their head and shaking lures out of their mouth because of the leverage of the lure. So now by detaching the body of the lure and the weight of the lure from the hook, he can't shake it out. Okay, he can't shake that out of his mouth. Number three, less damage to the lure. And when they're $22.99, are you kidding me? It's got to cost like $22 to make that in Asia or whatever. But nevertheless, I'm not saying well, that's what they charge here. I'm saying in general. I'm sure they have a great price here. Okay? Never. How much? No. Point I'm making is they're expensive. So less damage to the lure. But perhaps most important, is you can now fish lighter leader. I don't need to fish 80 or 100-pound test leader. And the lighter leader that I fish, the more natural of a presentation I can achieve, right? Okay, and as we mentioned so many times, the key to fooling big snook is a natural presentation. So these spool techs, which come in a variety of different sizes and patterns, absolutely awesome. They sink slowly, that tail swims and moves, dramatically, okay? And again, that just pulls right out. Now, I'm not sure if you can see that, but of course you can come up at the end of the seminar and check it out. There's a little spool, hence the name Spool Tech, okay? And all you do is turn the spool with your fingers and it winds. You can see I'm slowly winding that hook all the way back up into the bait. So after you get a bite or catch a fish and it rips the hook out of the bait, you just turn the little spool and wind the hook all the way back up into the bait. And it has a little kind of seat where the hook sits in the bait. Did you have a question? I saw somebody raise their hand.
What size leader? You said lighter leader. What size
So again, it depends on the environment that you're fishing. So instead of fishing 80 or 100-pound leader, I would go to 40 to 60-pound leader, okay? Still heavy. You're not going to go down to 20-pound leader because remember, you're still targeting these big fish. So you can go down to lighter leader, but obviously not all the way down to 20-pound. So these spool techs, great swim bait, great at, the bridges, very much like the flare hawks, okay? You can certainly use them at the beach as well. Doesn't matter where you are. I mean, it mimics a bait fish. It mimics a mullet or, any other sort of bait fish, depending on the pattern, so to speak. Around docks, okay, they're also really good along seawalls, anywhere where there's structure, So again, really cool invention. We talked about, again, the spinning outfit on bridges, but you certainly can fish a conventional outfit as well. In this particular case, 8-foot rod. This is on the light side. 20 to 40-pound test is on the light side. What I showed you that heavier rod before, I would definitely recommend an 8-foot rod in the 30 to 60-pound class when you're targeting these big snook on piers and off bridges where you just don't have a lot of give and a lot of flexibility or leeway, and you have to stop those fish dead in their tracks, okay? But again, conventional or spinning, both can get the job done depending on what your particular preference is. Lastly, let's talk about spillways. Spillways. What's a spillway? Okay, basically, we've got Lake Okeechobee, right, in the middle of the state of Florida. And instead of the middle of the state of Florida flooding, they pour water out of the lake through these channels that all feed out into, ultimately, the ocean. And there's gates, floodgates, okay, that close off these channels. Now, when it rains real heavy, they don't want flooding anywhere in our communities or in these rivers or in Lake Okeechobee, so they opened the gates. And all of this fresh water comes flushing through the gates into the intracoastal. Now remember that snook, unlike almost all other saltwater species, snook can tolerate fresh water. Okay, they can tolerate fresh water. Really, really cool characteristic. This fish can live in saltwater and this fish can live in freshwater. How do they do that? I don't know, but they can, okay? So when those floodgates open, it's like ringing the dinner bell for snook. All of the snook that are in the intracoastal, man, it's like somebody sends a text to all of the snook, okay? Or Snapchat or something. They put it on Instagram, Snookagram, and they all go rushing to the spillways. Because once those gates are open and all of that millions and millions of gallons of water is being pumped out, what comes with that water? Oh God, so much forage, so much food, cichlids, sunnies, you know, little panfish, largemouth bass, catfish, shrimp, these freshwater shrimp, all kinds of stuff is being poured out. Shiners, and the snook just lay there and just gorge. They just gorge on all of this food because not only is this food being, you know, literally coming to them, but the food is disoriented because that water coming out of the spillways, out of the gates, is rushing out so fast and so strong that it's like tumbling the bait fish. You know, it's almost like, well, I guess there's no other better way for me to say it. It's like tumbling the bait fish. So all of the bait fish are just disoriented, where they become really, really easy prey for the snook. And as a top-tier predator, that predator knows the less energy that I have to exert, the greater the reward for my meals. So if all I have to do is lay there along the bottom in a little eddy, okay, where, you know, off the main channel, and wait for food to come to me, and all I got to do is go up and just swallow it, and I'm exerting very little energy, but my gain is tremendous. That's a perfect feeding scenario for a top-tier predator, right? So that's what those snook are doing at those spillways. Now understand, the only time that that bite's going to be on fire at those spillways are when the gates are open, okay? And when do the gates open? When it rains. So when it's raining or just rained, or sometimes even it's about to rain and they want to lower the water levels, they open the gates. If you are unsure of where these spillways are, I want you to Google South Florida spillways. And here comes a map of where the spillways are. I mean, literally, here, 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 and here. It points you right to them. Access to spillways can be limited. Some of the areas you're going to see signs that say no fishing, and I always get a kick out of it. This cracks me up. I see all these pictures on social networks of these guys and these kids, and they're holding up these snook at the spillway right next to the sign that says no fishing here, you know, or no trespassing, and they're like, you know. So, you know, I'm not telling you what to do or what not to do. Just remember that access can be limited at some of these spillways. And they'll go to the extent where there's these high fences and they'll like fish over the fence, like this. I mean, they're serious. This is how serious they are about catching these snook. They'll fish over the fence like this. It's crazy. Were you one of those guys? No, okay. At the spillways, you could fish. Some of them you can only access by boat. Some of them you can fish from land. There's a cable that generally runs across. If you are fishing by boat, you cannot tie off to that cable. That's against the law. A lot of guys will pull the bow of their boat right up to the cable and lay the cable on the bow of the boat without physically tying off to it. And sometimes that holds their skiff or bay boat in place. However, most of the spillway fishing is done from land, from the sides, and understand that this is, when, you know, before when I said you're dealing with structure at the pier, oh boy, at the spillway, that's a whole other level, because you've got rock, you know, lining, all sorts of rock lining both sides of the canal. You've got oftentimes these concrete jagged pillars. You've got a cable that's running across. The structure there is crazy. This is not about showing up at the spillway with this and thinking you're going to stop or catch a 30-pound snook. It's not going to happen. Okay, this, like I said earlier, is really hardcore urban fishing. Okay, ideally speaking, This is a bare minimum, 30 to 60 pound class rod, 7 foot, matched to, I almost don't care what reel it is, but it's loaded with 80 pound braid. Okay, 80 pound high vis, again, because that water is so murky, you're not fishing clear water. You can't see 6 inches below the surface. The water is that murky. Okay, so don't worry about fishing the high vis. Okay, it's got a very heavy leader. Again, 80 pound test, heavy hook, the Nemesis circle hook. Let's see if I can break my leader on 2 rods. So in turn, very little terminal tackle that could fail. There's a little float. Why is there a float? Because I want to be able to monitor my bait. I want to make sure my bait's not jammed under a rock. I want to be able to throw the bait out and watch it float down. So it's almost a little bit of a strike indicator. It's not generally there to keep that bait at a certain level. It's just a little bit more of a strike indicator and to help you understand where your bait is. Also understand that the spillways, same thing. This is not about hooking a fish and letting them run and, ooh, I got this snook. No, baby. You are locking up and holding on. What's nice about a reel like this, it's got a big open spool where even if that drag is locked down and that fish is still pulling line off the reel, you could easily thumb it and stop them. Okay, you could easily thumb it right there and just really hold on real tight. Best baits at the spillways, best live baits. Anybody fish spillways for snook? Okay. What's the best live bait? You tell me. That's right. You said you fish spillways, right?
Like panfish.
Panfish, okay, like bluegills or cichlids, okay. And where do you catch your bait?
Like little shrimp.
Where?
At the spillway.
Okay. He catches his bait at this, what's your name? Luke? Luke, come on up here for a minute. Everybody give Luke a big hand. So Luke is an expert at fishing for giant snook that are bigger than he is at the spillways all across South Florida. He tells us that he catches his live bait right there at the spillway. Why?
Because that's what they're eating.
Because that's what they're eating. Okay, absolutely perfect. Okay, he's got it dialed in because that's what they're eating. So it only makes sense to show up and catch your bait right there. So tell us, Luke, how do you do it? When you show up at that spillway, are you spending time catching a bunch of baits? Are you catching one bait? What are you doing?
We either like go get shiners, but like you can also just have a little J hook,
Okay.
something, and catch like little cichlids
So-
or worms, or go like if you can make it over.
So you can show up with shiners and fish the shiners, but like you said, you can put on a worm or a little piece of shrimp and catch your bait right there.
Yeah.
And are you trying to catch a lot of baits, or are you trying to catch one bait at a time? What are you trying to do?
I mean, you could easily just catch a few, but if you
Okay.
want to like get a lot.
And is
you
it
don't-
easy to catch the bait, Luke, at the
yeah.
spillways? Why? Because there's so much of it, right? Being
Yeah.
pumped out of there.
The freshwater, yeah.
Luke, what's the best spillway to catch giant snook?
I mean, I only fish.
What do you think?
One. I mean, I haven't really fished that much spillways, so.
Which one do you fish?
Military. The one-
On military trail? Okay. Guys, a big hand for Luke. Again, he's doing it the right way. Thank you, man. Okay. You catch your bait right there. It's that simple. Okay, you don't need a lot of baits. You know, again, we're not trying to catch 50 baits. You can catch one bait at a time and fish it. You can catch 2 or 3 and put it in a bucket, you know, with a little aerator. Plus these cichlids, you can't kill these things. Okay, you could step on it 10 times, it'll still be alive. Okay, the things it's crazy. Or at the very least, you can show up with shiners. Okay, you can show up, you know, mullet will work there as well. But nothing beats the forage that they're feeding on. Okay, and again, a lot of times you'll walk right up to the edge of that spillway. Don't get the wrong impression. You don't need to cast your bait way out there. Oftentimes it's a steep little drop off right there. You literally are standing right on the edge and going, "Doop," right there, right in front of you. Okay, and oftentimes you can watch those big snook come up and swallow that bait right there. And at that point, you just need to lock up and hold on, because again, it's a very intense fight. If you're gonna fish lures at the spillways, like we talked about earlier, these fish are lying on the bottom. They're right on the bottom, they're feeding up, okay? Their eyes are on the top of their head, they're waiting for forage to be swept in their direction, okay? Luke, before I forget, this is for you, great job. Okay, so the fish are being swept. The bait fish is being swept right in their direction. They're lying right on the bottom. So you obviously want a lure that is swimming right on the bottom. That's why those flare hawks are great lures to fish at spillways, or any sort of swim bait with a weighted head. You don't want to fish a top order bait, okay? They're not feeding on fish that are up on top, and you've got a lot of turbulence. It's almost like a river. You know, when those gates are open, the velocity of that water coming out could be absolutely incredible. So spillways, daytime and nighttime. However, it's a little bit shaky fishing some of those areas at night. Just be careful, okay? That's all I got to say about that. Don't slip and fall, you know, and getting, like I said, access to some of those areas can be a little bit shaky. But, you know, let me finish off and tell you that the key with these big snook, like I've said throughout this seminar, and I want to just stress this, it's about natural presentations. It's about using the appropriate tackle at the appropriate venue. Okay, it's not one rod works at bridges, inlets, beaches, spillways. It doesn't work like that. You do need a variety of different gear to match the particular venue that you're fishing. Obviously, if there's a lot of structure and you need to stop them, you better be fishing heavier gear. If you've got the leeway and the flexibility where there's no structure and it's a beach or the middle of an inlet, or let me tell you, outside Boynton Inlet, right outside Boynton Inlet, wide open, you can catch big snook all day long on this little rod and reel and have a ton of fun. All day long and have a ton of fun. You go right up to the pier, not far away. You know, just run to the north a little bit and you better be fishing this. Okay, you better be fishing a meat stick, a pool cue, to catch those same fish that you were catching right outside the inlet on this little 10-pound spinner. Okay, it's the same fish, but because the venue is different, you've got to cater to that particular venue. Fresh baits, okay, natural presentations, double check all of your connections all of the time. I say this, if you're just joining us, tonight is your first seminar. You'll learn that at every seminar, I stress how important it is that angler failure and tackle failure lead to the loss of more fish than anything else. You know, like I've said, how many people have lost a big fish due to a bad knot? He's the only guy. In this whole room, one guy has lost a fish to a bad knot. Okay, come on. We all have, right? We all have. Okay, so double check, you know, learn the fundamentals. You don't need to learn all this fancy schmancy stuff. Learn the easy peasy stuff, but master it. Okay, make sure it works. Double check your leaders, double check your drag. Sometimes you want that drag to be locked down because you need it to be locked down. On other occasions, you can fish a light drag when you're fishing lighter leader and lighter hooks and lighter tackle on the beach. These fundamentals all come together to ensure that you're going to be as successful as possible. Don't give up. If at first you don't succeed, don't give up. Don't say, hey, I'm going to go out there and try and catch a 36-inch snook, and you know you didn't achieve that goal. Don't say, oh, forget it. You know, keep trying, keep going, keep getting more and more dialed in. And like I said, you'll learn over time how to cater your approach, but if you use what you picked up here tonight, that's how you do it. Okay, that's how the best guys do it. That's how the most successful guys do it. It's not rocket science, but you have to pay attention to the details and you have to do it right. Okay, that's the most important part.